Hi, Jodi Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and a certified informational privacy professional, helping to provide practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I do that through identifying the problems and coming up with practical, implementable solutions. I am a cybersecurity subject matter expert and business attorney.
And this episode is brought to you by Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e-commerce, media agencies, professional services, and financial services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, go to redcloveradvisors.com. And today, I'm so excited to have Rob Cummings with us. He is the managing director and chief technology officer at Falfurrias Capital Partners, a Charlotte-based private equity firm that acquires or invests in middle market businesses. As the managing director, he provides management oversight and guidance to the various portfolio companies, as well as leads various strategic initiatives for the business. Rob, we're so delighted to have you here with us today.
Good morning, Justin and Jodi. Good to be here.
Awesome.
You failed to mention Rob's most important credential. He's a graduate of where?
Oh, right. The two of you share Virginia Tech
Go.
Hokies.
For the video, should I get up and do the hokey pokey? Yeah, we don't want to see that.
Is that really a thing? Do you do that?
The football
Sure.
games we used to.
Football
Really?
games with a little bit of alcohol to prod you along.
Ah, who knew?
Well said.
I did not know this. I'm so excited to be able to use this against you in the future. This is fabulous. Okay. Well, Rob, take us back a little bit and help us learn how you started in your career and how you got to where you are today, working and investing in middle market companies.
Yeah, great. So at Virginia Tech, I was what's now called Business Information Technology graduate, BIT, which is basically combining business and technology as part of the business school. And I'm probably one of the few people that can say 30 years later, I still use my degree. My entire career has been around business and technology, mostly on the technology side, worked and been part of executive teams for a number of different software companies. But I joined Falfurrias Capital about 10, 12 years ago. And as you mentioned in the introduction, I'm the chief technology officer. And really, I have two functions working with our portfolio companies. I either tech enable a product or service for our portfolio companies, or I drive efficiency at those portfolio companies through the use of technology. And so data privacy and security falls into my span of control. So whether it's in due diligence and looking at the controls that a company may have in place or not have in place, to a company that's under our ownership for a number of years, making sure that they're staying up to date with regulations.
Awesome.
So, Rob, it's interesting you're our guest today because later today I'll be on a 90-minute phone call with all the CEO portfolio companies of a private equity group to talk about ransomware because one of the portfolio companies has now had to manage that. And we're going to talk all about that, but I'd love to get your perspective today around how you feel a lot of the companies that you are looking to invest in or our portfolio companies are managing privacy and security risk.
It's interesting. It's become a thing the last 2 years. So if I go back 2 years ago, part of my standard due diligence process, because I always run technology due diligence, would cover data privacy and security. 5 years ago, that was not the case. So any new investment, there's a whole checklist that we're going through. And at times where collecting data may be a really important business process of the company, I may bring in a Red Clover Advisors to help with the diligence. But point being is it is always it's one of the items that we go through as part of technology diligence. I would say that companies are much more aware of it today. So, a lot of times, I mean, we just did a acquisition and follow-on acquisition in the last 30 days for a company, and just being candid, the acquisition of the portfolio company, they don't have a lot of this in place. So immediately, 100-day plan, these are all high priority items that we need to work through. The add-on acquisition had a lot more in place. It's a focus area. So both on the data privacy and security side. So to answer your questions, it's all over the place. But the one thing I would say is some of our investments that are maybe 5 or 6 years old, so we're still harvesting those investments. Since it wasn't necessarily a thing that we looked at 5 or 6 years ago, I'm going back and saying, hey, we need to be investing in data privacy and security. And we sold a company last year, and again, Jodi knows about this. We actually did a sell-side project to do a full data privacy study and work on the data inventory, individual rights agreement for that portfolio company in preparation for the sale. And so, because we knew if Rob is looking at it from an investment perspective, potential buyers of our portfolio companies are going to be looking at the same thing. And so we were able to basically get the house in order to sell that company. This is one of many things that we did, but we did it pre-sale before we sold the company.
So Rob, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question that you kind of alluded to. So to what extent on deals that you're either investing or potentially in the sales cycle, where if they don't have the right privacy or security controls in place, how is that affecting the price that you are willing to pay? Or is that just built in as we know we're going to have to do this? It's just part of the cost of doing business.
Well, I think that brings up a bigger question. There are so many factors that can lead to a deal not getting done. And this is just one of many things that we look at, like, concentration is the reported EBITDA, what it's really said. So there's a number of things that we look at to determine whether or not we're going to invest. I personally haven't seen security or data privacy crater a deal per se, but I have seen it where it becomes some red flags that even our underwriters on the deal are coming back to us and saying this needs to be fixed within the first 100 days of ownership. So it goes on the 100-day plan, and we make sure that the day after closing, we are addressing some deficiencies that may have come up.
When you're evaluating and you find these types of companies, for those that don't put it as a priority, it sounds like in those situations, it might go on a special 100-day plan. As you're evaluating, obviously, all types of points, right? It's not just privacy and security, but it's one of them. What is the view or the perception of that company when they might have put privacy and security a little bit lower? Does it, is there any view of this is concerning, this isn't concerning? Just kind of curious to know as an investor when you're evaluating a company, and obviously we're very slanted from this privacy security side. But when you see that, what are kind of the triggers that come to mind?
Well, I go back to what I said before. Is their house in order? And typically, if there isn't a focus on security and data privacy, there's probably some other issues that we're going to uncover. And it may be a combination of a number of different things that leads us to make a decision to not invest. So I think it's going to be rare that the company is completely buttoned up, but they've totally forgotten about data privacy and security. You're really not going to see it. It's going to be symptomatic of the culture that the management team has created, as an example.
So I have a follow-up question to that, because my kind of thoughts or sentiments when I'm talking to some of the types of companies that you might be investing in, they haven't tackled privacy and security because it's not a priority. They're very focused on revenue and growing and all those types of things. And they think, well, I don't need to focus on it. I'll just take the risk. So when you come or there's an acquisition, how do you, because that's a bit of a culture piece. So how do you help adjust that for them or educate them on that was that was your philosophy then. This is why now we need to also focus on it.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I've certainly seen it a number of different times. Yeah, it's an education process, and whether it's going back to specific regulations. The one thing I'll say, here's the response I'll get is, we don't have a data privacy issue because we don't collect any PII, for example, personally identifiable information. And then you're like, well, okay, well, your accounting system, your CRM system, do you have a client contact's email address and their phone number? Oh, yeah, we have that. Well, you're collecting privacy information then. And so that's what we see. The immediate response, because they don't want to focus on it, is, oh, well, we don't have any privacy information. We don't have any PII on our servers. You dig a little deeper and you find out, no, that's not necessarily the case. Now, maybe it's just an email address and a phone number, and it's not, credit card information and that type of thing. But I would say everybody has this information. I mean, you have to know who your billing contact is in your accounting system, in your CRM system. You're specifically marketing to these individuals. So everybody has some level of PII. We have to determine if it's part of your core business process, and then where is it being stored, and is it is it behind firewalls, is it securitized, so to say. So it's an education process, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's got to be part of the culture that it's important to be in compliance and to respond to potentially any deficiencies.
Makes sense.
So kind of in a related question, from your perspective, what is the biggest challenge you see with your portfolio's companies and what they face from a privacy and security perspective, particularly in light of, I'd say, the last 2 months? I've seen ransomware demands go through the roof, as well as SolarWinds has some really serious ramifications for business in general going forward.
Yeah, there was a Modcast breach that was sent out this morning. And we have some portfolio companies that use Modcast for controlling email spam. So that's one thing I've been working on all morning is, okay, did it potentially impact a couple of our portfolio companies and our firm that uses Modcast? It looks like the specific threat did not impact any of those companies. But yeah, the biggest thing look, every single one of our portfolio companies is a potential breach target. And you can have the controls set up so you can see hackers trying to come in from China or whatever it may be, and you're thwarting those attacks. But look, I've lived through a number of them. I've gotten the call late at night that such and such portfolio company, someone clicked on a phishing email and put in some security criteria, and now we have a breach on our hands. It's happened numerous times. I hate to say that it's happened, but it's just, I think it's the reality of the world that we live in. And all that I can do is just make sure that we have procedures. So one of the governance documents that we always ask for is a cyber incident response. So if there is a cyber attack, how do you respond? How do you handle it internally? How will you notify your management team? More importantly, how do you stop the breach? How do you get the forensics teams involved to see what the potential damage was? And then how do you, what's the word I'm looking for? How do you get the insurance guys on board? Because the insurance providers that we use, they will have certain firms that they have approved already to do the investigative work, to do the remediation work. But you need to act on that pretty quick. So everybody now has a cyber incident response plan.
So Rob, I wanted to ask you a follow-up when you mentioned specifically the incident response plan. From your perspective, when you're working with the different portfolio companies, what is your expectation as to how often they actually practice the plan?
It's a good question. We definitely ask the plan be updated on an annual basis. I think it's fair to say that there's always a run through a simulation, like a disaster recovery simulation that's adjacent to this but similar. I would love to say that all our portfolio companies do that on an annual basis, but I don't think that they realistically do. So, it's my job with oversight as the CTO and working with our 11 portfolio company is to remind them of these things, that they have to have an updated incident response, that they need to be practicing, going through a disaster recovery drill or an incident response drill. I'm not sitting there, so it's not like I can force the hand, but it's my job to make sure that we are going through these steps, and that we have our portfolio companies have their house in order.
So switching back to kind of the privacy side, where we've talked about security and incident response and preparing, there's likely companies listening who are looking to potentially have some type of investment going forward. So if they wanted to prepare and have a privacy program, which of course includes security, but for the moment, let's kind of start with the privacy piece first, and then we could come back to the security part. What would you recommend that these growing companies do to help create, start, solidify, put any word in place, their privacy program?
Well, that's shameless plug for Red Clover, but hire Red Clover.
That was really gracious. I was really thinking, it was not where I was going. I assure you. It was. I'll
Back to what I said before is that we were preparing to sell a company a year ago, and we knew that we had to tackle this. They did not have a data inventory. They did not have any type of response procedures, and we knew this was going to come up in diligence. So we went ahead and engaged a firm, Red Clover, to do a data privacy audit. And so, several deficiencies were uncovered. And then we went through a month or two exercise to make sure all the things that I just mentioned, that the data inventory was there, that the response was there, that we had procedures in place. So then when it came up in due diligence from potential buyers, it was a checkbox. Yeah, that meets our standards. Move on to potentially other issues and overall due diligence. So my recommendation is hire experts. I don't have the expertise per se, and I don't think there's a lot of, for example, private equity firms that necessarily have the expertise also. Now, some of our larger portfolio companies may even have a CISO on staff, but that I think that's going to be pretty rare. We invest in the lower middle markets, and so for the most part, these companies aren't large enough to have a full-time CISO. But that being said, they can hire and have a part-time CISO, which I know is, again, another service that you provide, that can work with their company as well as a number of other companies.
Who do you think, in the types of companies that you're investing in, who should own or be responsible for privacy?
It's a great question. It seems to fall into my world as of late as the chief technology officer, but I'm not sure if it makes sense to be part of the technology group. I'd almost turn that question back to you as to where have you seen ownership? Certainly the office of the legal office is another place where you could see it. Where else have you seen it?
So that's the kind of the interesting piece, is it's in a variety of different places, but it depends on the size of the company. The bigger the company, they might have a general counsel on staff, and so it might fall under them, because so often they're, from the privacy side, it's a privacy law and would fall to them. From a security point of view, it generally, a CISO, and Justin, you can talk about where you think CISOs should fall, but the CISO should, well, I'll just let you. Well, where should CISOs go? I'm not even going to speak.
I think to Rob's point, it depends. For a lot of the companies that Rob works with, they have no CISO.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but let's take some of the larger companies that might have a CISO, or someone in the company, even if you don't have a full-time CISO, is going to still be responsible at some capacity. It might just be part of their job.
Then the question, then I'm going to throw back at the larger companies. What about the chief compliance officer? Because a lot of privacy and security is that. So then you throw that person to the mix. I think, to your point, Jodi, the larger you get with the company, you have all these different people who have a hand in the privacy and security role mix. So how do you put one person in charge, because you and I see all the time where it's like different people have different pieces and parts and no one person is responsible. And that's how things fall through the cracks, because someone else thinks it's Jodi's responsibility, not mine. And I think for the kinds of companies that Rob works with, they really don't have that role. So from company to company, I suspect Rob might tell us it can reside with a CTO here, it could reside with a CFO here, it could reside with someone else. It really goes all over the board. And then you throw in their varying degrees of technical understanding, which is probably why for a lot of the lower middle market companies, they really need to pull in those third-party experts to tell them what they don't know.
Yeah. So certainly the CFO is often, if there's no legal counsel, a CFO tends to own it because there's fines and there's risk. And so a CFO is trying to manage oftentimes the risk and those fines. And then
there's a compliance office. I think that's where it would make the most sense. But, to Justin's point there is that the companies that we deal with, that we own, are lower middle market. They don't necessarily have a compliance office. They may not even have any type of inside counsel that's even on their team. And so that's all outsourced. But yeah, I'm not sure if I believe that security and protecting your assets and protecting your data is a technology role. But data privacy, I'm not sure it belongs there. Personally, I've just inherited it. and learned enough to become dangerous.
I think the privacy side sometimes is owned by the person who also owns security. And I don't think it should fall there. I do think there should be a separation of managing the data. How I market to you, how I use that data is likely very different from the technical capabilities of how I'm going to protect it and make sure that Jodi, the employee, doesn't click on that phishing email.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. So it often goes back to how the type of data the company has and how it's using it and where the biggest risk to that data is.
So, Rob, we want to change gears a little bit because we ask all of our guests this question is, we'd love to get your thoughts on what is your best personal privacy tip, perhaps something you've learned from working with all of these companies.
It's a more of a personal story, but it applies to businesses also. It's really simple. Just take a breath. When you get emails and you quickly want to reply because you're in the heat of battle during your day, just take a breath and make sure it is not a phishing email. Phishing emails can be disguised so well. And so I've trained myself to look up at that sender email address and is it legit or not? Because you can mask those sender email addresses. But the reason I say it's personal is because I have a personal story that I'll share. So last summer, I'm sitting at the pool and all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up with Chase fraud alerts. And I'm getting all these alerts saying that X amount of dollars is being charged to my credit card. So I immediately have the family text, and I think everybody has these that have children that have mobile phones, and my children are in college. And so I sent out a family text and I said, who's trying to charge the credit card with XYZ merchant? And I get a response from my daughter, and she's like, something's wrong with my laptop, my Mac. I'm getting all these pop-ups, and the pop-up said to enter my credit card information here, and it'll fix the problem. And I'm like, oh, no, you can't. That's exactly what they want to do. So, she spazzed and immediately was like, well, I can't stand these pop-ups on my laptop, so I need to get it fixed. Let me just enter in the family credit card to fix it. So terrible response. And so that caused a whole free fall of issues. You got to make sure that someone hasn't taken over our credit card. I can't remember if we actually had to get a whole new credit card or not, but it just goes. She was presented with a pop-up. It wasn't necessarily a phishing email, but my recommendation is don't spaz. Just take a minute, take a breath, and just make sure. If you're entering credit card information or personal information, just make sure it's coming from a legit source. So one very common phishing technique is to ask for just login credentials to the company network or to your email or something like that, because a lot of times people will use the same username and password for accessing a lot of their corporate assets. And so once a hacker has that information, they have a number of different entry points into your network. And I've seen it happen with more than one of our portfolio companies. That's how they got in. And once they can get into the internal network, they can cause a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's a great story and a good reminder to educate not only yourself but your family members who might
And look,
also be
it's
having an
hard.
impact in all
Kids don't
your
get it.
information too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have younger children, but you know, they reach an age where they're supposed to be responsible adults, but they don't realize the impact. And it's a weird conversation to have with your children, but you got to educate them so that they understand that my daughter just doesn't immediately enter in hey, I enter the credit card information, all these problems go away. No, it doesn't work that way.
I wish it was that simple. It's
Yeah.
like the magic wand, right?
Yeah.
Enter in and poof.
So the end of that story, just to finish up. So of course, her laptop was completely compromised, which, the world was going to come to an end because the laptop didn't work. So ended up having to take the laptop to Geek Squad over at Best Buy and get it re-imaged and all that kind of stuff. And now we have some ridiculous program that if anything ever happens to that laptop again, Geek Squad will go as far as replacing it. So I don't know, you got to protect your kids from themselves.
That's a good story. So Rob, when you're not solving phishing email problems or credit card disasters or advising portfolio companies on what they should or shouldn't be doing, what do you like to do for fun?
Well, I'm getting old, so we are just this year empty nesters. So we have two kids that are in college, and so we went ahead and bought a beach house. And so we have a beach house in the Outer Banks in Duck, North Carolina, that we just closed on a month ago. And so that's going to take up a lot of our time. But the hope is that we always did a family vacation or vacations every year. But as kids get older and they have their own agendas and their own friends, and they are becoming adults, it's hard to get the family of four together. And so we're hoping that the beach house will be the magnet for years to come. So we have a lot of renovation work to do to get it ready for that. But that's where we're focusing time right now. And first thing I did is, in this working from home environment, is I set up a great office at the beach. So I'm at home right now, but I do have the option of being extremely productive, even though I'm 65 yards from the ocean, if I need to be.
That sounds lovely. That sounds really nice. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. How can people connect with you if they'd like to learn more about you or what the firm does?
Probably LinkedIn is the best. So Rob Cummings, I think I have it under Rob Cummings Charlotte. I tend to do that. So live in Charlotte, but they can find me on LinkedIn. My contact information is out there. Twitter handle also, I believe, is Rob Cummings CLT. So love to connect. And thank you for having me on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great to have you.
Yeah.